Hello, and a wrap up. What a way to start. This was not the way I was anticipating to my next video to be. The whole moving to Canada thing has shifted timeline quite significantly. Next to me, you can't see it, but I have a suitcase next to me. I have piles of books and clothes and stuff because I'm actively packing and throwing stuff away, etc. This is a wrap up. These are the books that I read in the month of May. We have a smorgasbord of genres. You know, like as you can see here, a majority of the books I read were under 200 pages. And then there's one big chunk that's above 500, and that's going to be, I think you can obviously tell which one it was. In terms of genres, it's a straight battle between literary and fantasy. No one's winning out there. And overall, you can't really have any complaints when you get that high of an average rating. However, I'm sure I'll find a way. So, how are we going to do this? You tell me in the comments how you prefer it, whether you prefer me to go from lowest rating to highest rating, or chronologically, so you get a mix and a feel of when I was finishing things and what I was giving as the month went on. I don't know which one people prefer. Nevertheless, I'm going to do it chronologically. Let's do that. So if you do enjoy, please do like, please do subscribe, and to get straight into it, I finished the City Watch series by Terry Pratchett. Me and Grace, she was like going through series that she started, and she mentioned the idea that she had not finished City Watch. Neither of us did. After Thud, I think it was, we put the series down because honestly, after Night Watch, that was such a high and felt like such a great ending for Vimes that it felt weird going back in. And so we both decided that having a bit of time away would do good and we would enjoy returning to finish the series. And then, I don't know how long it was, let me check. So yeah, a year and a half went by between Thud and actually getting to Snuff. And it was worth the wait. I think it needed the wait. I ended up giving this 4.25 stars because it had a quite slow start. To give an idea, the plot effect like kind of sees Vimes going on holiday to the countryside, and it deals with very, as always, class-based issues, racial issues, and to begin with, it was slow. It kind of was getting you back into the feel of like how Vimes was getting along and the kind of feeling of this place, this countryside setting. And once it kind of got beyond that and we started moving into the actual mystery plot, it just hit prime City Watch level. It was incredibly funny. There was a lot of really powerful speeches, as always with Pratchett, but I feel like at this point, I think he wrote this after the diagnosis, and there's a sense of rage in some of the things he says. There's a sense of real, like, yeah, super Dylan Thomas, super like rage against the dying of the lights type, just like balls to the wall anger. And for me, that's why I read Pratchett. Like, people read it for different reasons. I read it for the class rage. I mean, it's the last book. I've completed it, so of course I recommend the City Watch series. It's stellar. It's absolutely a part of me now that it's been like 2 years since I read the first one, wants to go back and read it all again, even though there's way more Discworld to read, just because I absolutely adore all of these characters so much. So there's no need for me to tell you to read City Watch. Next up is a book that I've been wanting to read for quite a while, and that's The Final Strife by Saara El-Arifi. This was a debut novel that got quite a bit of hype when it came out, and it was always one where I just, hardbacks are expensive. I struggle to justify paying as much for a hardback. And then I'm pretty sure I got this one through Broken Binding because they were doing a sale. And it was a signed copy, half price hardback. How can you say no? And so I thought I'd pick it up, and I'm wanting to try more recent fantasy. As much as I'm also going back and wanting to read more classic fantasy, I'm also actively wanting to read a lot more present, coming out recently fantasy. And this was one that I was really interested in. It's kind of taking a dystopian setup in the vein of Hunger Games Divergent, in the sense that there are certain positions of power within this society, and that there are these essential like kind of tests that you have to go through to become that position, etc. And alongside that, rather than doing like it's very much a class-based thing, but it also becomes extremely intricately tied to race, and a race in the sense that people are separated by the colour of their blood. Um, those with red blood, who are, let's make sure I've got the terminology right, embers. Embers are essentially, they are the ones that control this world. They are the colonizers. They are the ones who have they have abundance of everything. They are the privileged. And then there are the dusters, who are the blue bloods. And so we're following Saara, our main character. And one of the best elements that I thought that this book had is that she is someone struggling with the aftermath of what happened previously, which I think she is an addict at the beginning of the book. She is in a very vulnerable position. She's willing to do anything. And I think the book, starting from that position of just absolute resignation to her addiction, has it invests you in that character so quickly. Overall, I really enjoyed this. It suffers from, this is a debut, it does suffer from some like teething issues of a first-time author. Mainly around showing, not telling. Some of the romance, I thought it was like you would have one chapter of genuine growth, and then it would kind of tell you that they'd fundamentally changed their feelings between the chapters, rather than allowing you to kind of feel that gradual shift. It was kind of like, okay, I'm telling you at this incremental point, this is how they're feeling and this is how they're changing. And so I think I'm going to continue reading the series, and I'm hoping that as they kind of develop their voice and develop their confidence in being able to convey those emotions, then they won't rely so much on kind of signposting it as much. So I gave the final Strife 3.5 out of 5. I thought it was a really solid debut. My ratings for first book in a series, it's almost always below a 4. I kind of am quite harsh, evidently, to first books in series. I'm not aware that I do it, but as I looked back, I was kind of like, oh damn, I do tend to. The second book seems to get a real rise from me. Nevertheless, the next book I read was Passiontide by Monique Roffey. It's the next novel after The Mermaid of Black Conch, which is a book that I adored. I did an essay for it at uni, and so I really enjoy Monique Roffey's work that I've read. And so I got an e-arc for her new novel, Passiontide. This one was really interesting. This one was actually really interesting. I gave it a 3.75. I really enjoyed it. We're on an island in the Caribbean, and a woman has been murdered. She is a pan player on this island. She is not from the island. She comes here every year to play pan, and is known by the local community for that. And so she is found murdered, and it kind of starts with this feeling of this is a typical detective story. Here's the detective who's investigating. Here's the mayor. Here's all the characters that are involved that you would typically find in a crime novel, and then it subverts it by essentially, rather than telling you how the crime is solved, portrays it where it's like, these are the people, and here are the flaws inherent in society and the positions they hold and in the people themselves, and why femicide is continually happening, and it's it's not solved, it's underspoken about, it's criminal in the sense of ironically in the sense of how little anything is done about it. And it wonderfully juxtaposes those two things together. It uses crime conventions to highlight the lack of cases being solved. And so I thought all of that was brilliant. And for a lot of the book, I really felt like it was doing an amazing job. My main issue with the book came at the very end. And the very end is that I don't believe it goes far enough one way or the other. The book definitely throughout, you feel that there's this sense of it can either go one way or the other. It will either say that we are working on femicide and need to do more, and we can do more through this, etc. Or we're not doing enough, this is a call to action, this is fucked, you need to do something about it. And instead, the book runs this middle line, depending on which character you are. And I felt that for a book that was speaking so strongly and so evocatively and so powerfully, it ended on a bit too much of a non-ending, in the sense of what the audience is meant to take away from it. Like, I know what I took away from it personally, and there's an afterword that explains the decision in terms of the ending. But I just think that based on what decision she made from the ending, it needed to be revised more to really hammer home the change from what she was originally planning. And that's my main criticism. Is just that I felt like I was being brought to this place to really leave with just this full of emotion, full of readiness, and I felt that I was kind of like strung between two different options, and I just kind of left feeling like, oh, I don't quite think that the author knows what she wants from this, so I don't know what I'm meant to take from it. But I still think that most of the book is brilliant in terms of what it's doing. I thought it was very interesting, and I would still recommend to read The Mermaid of Black Conch at the very least. That book is brilliant. And I do recommend Passiontide, because the ending, I can only talk about my experience with it. Other people may read it and get exactly what they want from the ending, and know how they feel. It was just for me that I had a little bit of struggle with that. The next new release I read, I'm full of new releases. I'm very proud of myself in terms of actually reading books that are coming out as they come out. It's something I've never been able to do. And I've already spoken about this in my last video, so I'm not going to go on about it too much. But it's Ghost Mounted by Ronan Hession. It's brilliant. Ronan Hession's brilliant. He's one of my favourite authors. 100% recommend it. I don't really have much more to say than that. I have a full review in my last video. It's the last book in that, so I'd recommend having a look there for a more detailed review. Read Hession's work. No matter what it is, he's got 3 novels out. Read one, support him, support Blue Moose Books. I think they're brilliant. I think they're putting out excellent work and deserve all the support that they can get. I gave that a 4.5. Just a heads up. Then we come to the behemoth, the thing that took up the most of the month, understandably, because it's a fucking joke. Words of Radiance by Brandon Sanderson is a goated fantasy book. It's just one of the best fantasy books. For me, it's on par with a Storm of Swords. It's that level of just... It's not only a brilliant book unto itself, it resolves so much that you've had from previous entries, and it just hits so hard. I think in this, Sanderson has a lot more belief in his characters. He has a lot more belief in his world building, because there's so much to do in Way of Kings to keep the audience interested, to keep them dangling and interested in the world building, and keeping a fine line of interest, because it is a long book with a lot to take in. This one, he is able to have a lot more fun. He is able to completely expand a lot of things, to revise, to reframe a lot of events from the first book. To me, I view The Way of Kings and Words of Radiance as just one massive book, because I think there's so much in this that pays off that first book, and so as a result, the emotional connection is just so much more, because you've spent so much time with the characters to have the resolutions that are in this book. This is, of course, a reread. I've read this, I read it during COVID, so it was 4 years ago now, and so a lot of it felt really fresh. There are certain key scenes that I remember vividly, and rereading them was just so... It gave the exact same feeling again. I teared up at the same moments. I was enjoying it actively the way I was the first time, and I was also appreciating it a lot more in terms of the foreshadowing it's doing for later in the series, in terms of noticing a lot more of the heralds, world hoppers, all these things that the first time I read it, I'd only read the first Mistborn trilogy and then these books. I had no idea of the scope that was happening throughout this series, and so I'm so excited for Wind of Truth. Oathbringer I will be reading in August, I think, in terms of reading 1 a quarter, and so I'm thoroughly ready for that. So that was a 5 out of 5. I still think it's one of the best fantasy books ever written. Fortress of the Pearl is the second book in the Elric of Melniboné series. Now, it's second in this compilation. It was actually written, it was the 8th book written, I think. but chronologically it's the second, so in this bind-up it's second. I'm going to have a whole video on Elric and his influence and Moorcock in general, so I'm not going to go too much into this purely because I don't want to give it away. But yeah, there's a lot I want to talk about in terms of the influence of Moorcock on modern fantasy. And I gave this book a 3.5 because essentially my kind of realization is that I love reading Elric because it shows me all the things that modern authors have drawn from for inspiration. But I do realise that I enjoy most of the things that other people have done with his ideas more than the ideas themselves as presented in the book. But there's 4 books in there. They're about 150 to 200 pages each. They are perfect palate cleansers, and you really do get a lot from it. I think in terms of reading classic fantasy, this is a great example to be able to pull from, and I think you get a lot from it. Yeah, from understanding tropes and archetypes and world building that has still around, especially in something like Sanderson. There's direct correlations that I'm going to talk about, but they're not hefty boys you have to bloody go through. They are nice and short, they get the idea across, and they let you get on with your life. So they are perfect palate cleansers, so I would recommend it from that point. Now, Eileen by Ottessa Moshfegh was picked by Trey from my Patreon picks, and so essentially, I mean, I've read My Year of Rest and Relaxation twice, and I've read Lapvona by Ottessa Moshfegh. So I've wanted to read more than of her. I mean, I wrote my dissertation on My Year of Rest and Relaxation. I was glad when it was picked for my Patreon pick. I gave this a 3.5 as well. There's a lot of 3.5s this month, purely because I was feeling a 3 for the majority of this book, because it's following a woman who she's kind of recounting her past. She's recounting the kind of events that led to her fleeing her home, leaving her father, and starting a new life. So you kind of have that idea of like, oh, this is going to be, we'll probably get to that quite, not soon, but I'd guess maybe halfway through. It's much more laborious in the sense of you're experiencing this person's life. And it's classic Ottessa Moshfegh, where it's the most horrifically, the best way to describe it is that the book starts where she's like scratching herself in quite an intimate place and sniffing her fingers. She's sticking ice down her panties to cool her down because she's horny. It's all kinds of the most depraved shit. And I would say that there are massive trigger warnings for certain things in this book, such as paedophilia. And yeah, I would definitely not recommend it in any sense to anyone who has even the slightest inkling of problems with that, because I found it horrendously difficult to read and uncomfortable. And that is, of course, the point that Ottessa Moshfegh is a perversely confrontational author. Yeah, there's a reason that she's compared to John Waters. She is just verbosely disgusting. And however, I find an enjoyment in that. I think she's such a provocative writer from that sense that I do enjoy it. But this and Lapvona are definitely 2 books that go too far for me, in the sense of I find them a little bit overlong, a little bit self-indulgent, and this one does have a brilliant wrap-up that ties everything together exceptionally well, but I do think that we overstay our welcome by 30 to 50 pages. Around the halfway mark, it really picks up, but that first half, you're just reading about the worst woman having the worst life, and it's very difficult to get through. I struggled personally. But I have a video that I want to do on Moshfegh, going through the 3 books I've read by her and kind of going through what is so appealing about the vileness of her writing. Now, almost in complete contrast, next up is Slow Days, Fast Company by Eve Babitz, which I utterly adored. It is a series of short stories by Eve Babitz, who's writing in the kind of 1970s, 1980s, set in Hollywood, and she essentially has this as an idea of, if I tell you a bunch of short stories all set around this period in Hollywood, in different places with different people, hopefully it will create a mosaic that will let you know and let you experience what it felt like to live in Hollywood at this time. I thought it was brilliant. I think there's something truly wonderful about Eve Babitz's writing. She's essentially like the funnest pen pal you've ever had in your entire life. She writes very just gorgeous descriptions. The way she describes the beauty of the skyline, the beauty of just these pinks and oranges and blues, and then also alongside that has it with the idea of the smog and the choking nature and all of this thing, this idea of just pollution and the horror and the beauty that is a result of that. Her descriptions are sublime. The way that she draws the reader in, the way that she makes you feel like a friend that she is kind of whispering secrets to, in the sense of what she's doing with her life and how she's feeling, also is just, you can't help but just be drawn into her storytelling. And I also think that she does, I will say that the first 3 or 4 stories are by far the strongest in the catalogue, because another thing that I loved was that the first kind of 2 lull you in with these fun, kind of carefree stories, where she's doing all kinds of things. She's traveling around, visiting people, just living life to the most bizarre and fullest. And then the third one, I think it's the third one, let me make sure. Oh no, it's like 5. It's like the 5th one. It switches where suddenly it's like, this is the danger. This is the danger of trying to live this lifestyle. This is the danger of what happens when you make it to the top and you realise that it's not going to fix you. And that was a story, it's called Heroine, and it was such a beautifully dark story and such a kind of a really introspective and very thoughtful story that I really appreciated. And I think after that, it never quite reached that level again, because I just think if you just read those ones unto itself, I think it's the perfect encapsulation, and then it keeps going. And I could have stopped there, honestly, and probably would have rated it 5 stars. Instead, it continues with very interesting stories, but it doesn't hit that level ever again of pulling the reader through different emotions and really guiding you through an experience. But I do plan on reading more Eve Babitz because I thought it was brilliant. It was a 4.5, thoroughly enjoyed it. And then last, but certainly not least, the very short boy. I read The Death of Ivan Ilyich by Leo Tolstoy. So now that I've finished uni, there's been a lot of classics or different authors, etc., that I have not been able to get to. And one of them has been Tolstoy. Now, I still don't want to just jump straight into a tome like War of Peace, Anna Karenina, etc., that I could get slogged through, because I need to get into having fun reads again, or interesting reads to draw me up into some chunky boys. So I read The Death of Ivan Ilyich, and that is a straight 5 out of 5 for me. I thought it was the most brilliant short story I've ever read. I don't believe there's really any spoilers you can give about this book, because it kind of, like, the description on the back of the book spoils it all anyway, because it's so short. Essentially, Ivan Ilyich is dead. The first chapter kind of has, after his death, you're following his friends and partner, etc., as they're all at his funeral, or like all at viewing the body, and they'd rather be doing anything else. They can't face death. They, especially his colleagues, they can't face the fact that he died, in the sense of, well, he's dead. That doesn't affect me. That can't be me. I'd rather go play cards, etc. And there's a kind of sardonic wit to the whole book, in that sense that after that point, you know that Ivan Ilyich died after screaming for 3 days and 3 nights. And then the next bit, for the rest of the book, it follows his life leading to his death. It shows him the decisions he made, why he married who he married, why he got the job that he got, where he lives, his children, and then has him getting sick, has him kind of entering this place of complete self-pity, this place of resentment, and it's just this devolution, this absolute, yeah, just dissension into self-pity and resentment that was amazing. And it just reaches this, I remember it just reached this ending. The last like 10 pages was just this wonderful message of like, live for yourself, do what you want to do, don't let anyone tell you, don't let society decide, don't let anything at all tell you what to do. You need to make your decision, and at the end of your life, you're going to have to come to terms. You're the one that's going to have to look at your life and say that you made the right decisions and that you were happy with what you did. And it's almost the antithesis of My Way by Frank Sinatra. You know, like he's like, oh, I had some regrets, but not enough to mention. Ivan Ilyich is like, holy fucking shit. My entire life is nothing but regrets, and I don't know who to blame about it. And it was so good. It was so good. So I'm gonna continue. I've got The Dead by James Joyce. I've got White Nights by Dostoevsky. I've got some short stories or novellas by classic authors that I want to read, and then I'm gonna read more by them essentially. But that's a tale for a different day. They're the books I read this month. There were some bangers. There were some bangers, to be fair. I feel like the month went on forever. Because I was finishing my dissertation, it feels like 3 months since I read the final Strife and Snuff. I don't know how it was last month, honestly. But we're in June. I'm packing to leave. Life is a blur. Everything's going fast, and I hope you're doing good. And let me know what you read this month if you've got any recommendations. And as always, have a nice rest of your day.